Before we begin, thank you very much to James S. for joining the Patreon campaign. Thank you very, very much for the contribution. Thank you, everyone, for the support. You are the reason I can keep doing this. I keep saying that because it continues to be true. Thank you very much for allowing me to continue being a silly toy man on YouTube. As said before, we are very close to 300 shoutouts in a row, which is absurd. And if we hit that point, I think it's going to be Tuesday. I think Tuesday is officially the day we hit that mark, assuming we have the shoutouts to get there. So tune in. We might be hitting a big milestone or we might not. All right, so we learned earlier this week Peter Cullen will be receiving a Lifetime Achievement Award, which is a huge honor. It's from the same people who do the Emmys, so it is kind of a big deal. It's his peers recognizing him as someone who has dedicated their life to their craft and done an excellent job of it. Now, obviously, we know Peter Cullen. If you watch this channel, you know Peter Cullen. However, he's done more than just Optimus Prime. So I thought today, let's go over a few of the other things he's done in his career, a few of the highlights, a few of the other shows that he hit that you might not be aware of, and then, just see where that goes. So, obviously, we could talk about all of his appearances as Optimus Prime forever, because it just keeps going on and on. He is a prolific voice actor for Optimus Prime, appearing more often than not and being the go-to for most of Optimus Prime's roles over the years. And why not? Like, the voice is iconic. I mean, it's one of the reasons why the character has endured so long. It's just a perfect voice for this paragon of heroism that was the original Optimus Prime. It's very rare. It's very rare that a character from an 80s show, you remember, this was a cash-in. This was them coming up with a little bit of fiction for some Japanese toys that were already produced. They just ran them in America with fancier names and gave them a TV show and a comic book. I mean, this was supposed to be a cash grab, and it's turned into a 40-year gig for the man. That's kind of incredible. I don't think that's in any small part to how much he put into Optimus Prime. To the point where, do you know any other character from the 80s who went away and kids literally cried when it happened? No. It's just Optimus that traumatized children in 1986. But you know what? We love Peter. We love Peter as Optimus. Even today, he is still doing really well the role. Now, Peter starts his career the way a lot of voice actors do, especially back then. It was as TV announcers, radio performers. For starters, he was the voiceover for the Smother Brothers Comedy Hour, but he was also a regular featured player on the Sonny and Cher show. So you actually got to see him on stage, in person, doing comedy routines, which is not something I can imagine Peter Cullen doing today if all you know him is as the Bayverse Optimus Prime. I need to dig that up. I want to do a whole thing of just like going through Transformer voice actors appearing in live action and just like judging how they work. I've already got Frank Welker's comedy special on tap for that. We might just do a whole run through of that someday. But still, like many voice actors, he gets his start in humble places. But he's pretty quick to find things that are pretty notable today. He was the voice of King Kong. Not the original. But no, he was the voice in the King, he did the voice. What am I talking about? He did the noises. He did the animal noises for King Kong in the remake from the 70s. Which is still a really cool thing to say, that you were King Kong. I think that's a pretty cool accolade, personally. You know the other one that's really cool, as long as we're going by like just noises in movies? He's the Predator. That crackling, like that kind of like clicky crackly noise that he makes, when as the Predator talks, Peter Cullen improv'd that. I love the story behind it too, because he just looked at this and went, it's like insectoid. It made him think of like a cockroach rolled up on its back. So he just gave it this like skittering, chittery noise that was just like really creepy and disturbing. And it was not coming through to the audio producer in the booth. So it's, uh, he had to go like, no, listen back to it. And they listened back to it, and they got back to Peter. It was like, good job, you nailed it. Yeah, I mean, he still does that noise today at cons where he appears. It's weird. Here's a noteworthy one. Here's one that I think is really fun to actually have on your resume. He's the very first voice of Super Mario. This was during the Saturday Supercade show, where it wasn't a Mario cartoon. It was Donkey Kong. Remember, this was back in the coin-operated arcade days. You didn't have you didn't have like a Nintendo at the time. So Donkey Kong was the star because it was his video game. Mario was the side character. Not looking too much like Mario. We have to admit, even in the 90s, the Mario cartoon adaptations, even the 80s, let's say, like the Mario cartoon adaptations, I think were a little bit more accurate to source material than this guy was. Of course, all we had to go by was one game. He was barely out of being Jumpman at the time. Still, really cool thing to be able to check. I'm the first voice of Super Mario, and now it's Chris Pratt. What happened? Of course, he's got more famous roles besides just Optimus Prime. I think Eeyore would probably top that list. He's done Eeyore for so long. And that sleepy, like, depressed delivery is so different from Optimus Prime. It's the chameleon aspect of voice acting that I truly respect, because I can think back to when I was a kid, and I could pick out Scott McNeil's voice in everything I watched as a child. Oh, yeah, I'm watching Double Dragon, and I go, oh, that's Proto Man from Mega Man, things like that. You go watch Reboot and hear his voice, and I'm like, oh, that's Jimmy Lee from Double Dragon. I'm like, it's whatever I heard him in last. That's where I recognize the voice. So when I got to something like this, I'm thinking back to it, and like, at no point did my brain even connect that this was Optimus Prime. At no point did I ever think that, even though my brain seemed like really well tuned to be able to find that. It's a really impressive job. Here's the other one I did not pick out as a kid. I definitely did not imagine this one. Monterey Jack from the Rescue Rangers. And I loved Rescue Rangers as a kid. This is such a fun show. I mean, when I went to Disney while I was at TFCon, and they had like a little mini backpack, like a little mini, like the kind of like mini backpack that a girl walks around with instead of a purse. But it was done up like the Ranger plane, like their little like plane. It's a balloon with a bleach bottle hanging from it that they've put wings onto. They had that as a backpack, and I thought, this is not the kind of thing I ever buy, but this is so cool. No, Monterey Jack is such a big character in the show. Now, obviously, he's part of the main cast, but also I just mean personality-wise, he's so big. And again, so not how I normally imagine Peter Cullen. It's another really long-running gig for him. Another one of his more famous characters. That said, Peter had his hands in everything. If you were a voice actor back then, you tried to get a little bit of everything in. You tried to get work in just about any animated production that came out. Most voice actors will have, the vast majority of what they've done will be things like additional voices, or one episode characters, maybe narrator. And Peter's not unlike any other voice actor from that era. He runs pretty much along the same lines. He's got a lot of those. A lot of just like additional voice castings. But there's bit characters that kind of like dashed his career all over certain franchises. He was in G.I. Joe as well as Airborne. Not a major character in the show, but He actually tried to stay, unintentionally probably, staying loyal to Hasbro, sticking within like the Sunbow realm. That said, he was also Smash from Ninja Turtles, who was a one-episode villain and the leader of the Crooked Ninja Turtle Gang, which Shredder used to frame the Turtles for an episode. This is one I actually did pick out, though admittedly I was an adult once I did. So maybe maybe just my ear was not as finely tuned as I thought back then. But it's interesting to find out, like, it's appropriate though. It's appropriate though because, the voice director for that show was Sue Blue, RC. So this was her reuniting with Peter and getting to work together again, which is kind of cool. Not the only ones. Let's go the other way. This is a minor villain. Let's go into some major villains. So this is Murky Dismal. This is Murky Dismal from Rainbow Bright. So not just boys franchises, get into the girls franchises too. And yeah, he looks the part for a character literally named Rainbow Bright. Yeah, a black and white villain. Yeah, that's pretty much about as spot on as you get, I believe. It's still weird though. It's still weird to think of Peter Cullen as a villain because you just know him as like the Paragon Optimus Prime. So, but he does have that like deep gravelly voice that a lot of voice casting really tends to go toward villainy. How about Venger? This is the lead villain from the Dungeons and Dragons cartoon. So again, we're back to something that Hasbro would eventually own, ironically. So he's got big villain parts, right? And then he's got a few oddball ones that are just kind of fun to discuss. For instance, how about Pincher from the GoBots? Yeah. There was no loyalty back then. There was no Transformers is absolutely going to win the brand war. I'm sticking with them. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Pincher from the GoBots. Now again, not a major role, but fun to have a Transformer VA in there. Famously, yes, Frank Welker was also on that show as both Scooter, as Scooter. He did a few, but again, reuniting. I think it's always down to Peter and Frank at some point. Another fun one is go into just a live action a little bit. He's got a few movie and live action roles where it was technically a live action voiceover thing, like The Predator. The one that comes up a lot is Carr. Carr is from Knight Rider, which is a show most of you are probably too young to remember. So let's go read Wikipedia together for a second. So it's a show where the hero uses a talking sentient car, or at least programmed to seem sentient. And it's just like it's a supercar show. It's a show where the car is, basically his superpower. There was an evil car. Peter Cullen, the Optimus Prime, the leader of the Autobots, is playing an evil car. Literally named Carr. Karr. That's the kind of thing I love. And like I said, he's done bit roles here and there. Little things that kind of stand out in my mind. I really like the story of him doing the commercials for Toonami. Because he said in an interview once that when he got into the booth for that, the director said, "Can you give us the Optimus Prime voice?" This was the early 90s, or mid 90s, I should say. He was on TV as Optimus Prime in Generation 2, but that was not the impact that... So in Peter's mind, he hasn't really performed Optimus Prime in a decade. So he tells the caster, no one's going to know who that voice is. And the director's like, I'll know who it is. So go watch some old Toonami commercials. You're going to hear Optimus Prime talking about Tenchi Muyo and Dragon Ball and Outlaw Star and Gundam Wing. It's an amazing little head trip if you have not experienced it before. He is still active, even into his 80s. Peter Cullen is still active into voiceover, which is another wonderful benefit of the industry. You can currently hear him as Thaddeus in Invincible. I'm not following this show, so I've not heard his performance outside of a promo clip. He is very much giving a Peter Cullen voice, but the age in his voice lends itself well to Thaddeus, and it still has the kind of power you would expect of a character from this show. So it's a great fit. It is a really good fit. Though obviously we all know him as Optimus Prime. Most know him now from the live action movies. I'm not a fan of the depiction, but I can't knock the voiceover role and the performance. It's still Optimus Prime. You know, when I first heard it again in the 2007 movie, it's like hearing an old friend for the first time in forever, you know? Like, all the nostalgia buzz just, like, tingles my brain in the right way. And yeah, it's wonderful that he can still perform the character. It's extraordinarily rare when someone can have the same career for 40 years. And even rarer when someone can have the same acting role for 40 years. To top that, you either have to be in soap operas, or you have to be Frank Welker, who was Fred from Scooby-Doo for 50 years. I love this industry. I have so much respect for this industry. But no, it is amazing. It is amazing that because of our nostalgia and because of our love of this random 80s franchise that was only supposed to draw in a few bucks one Christmas, Peter has managed to have a career that is not only very long-lived, but also very worthy of giving the proper accolades and awards. So wonderful job these last 40 years, and a very well-deserved Lifetime Achievement Award. Obviously, he's had tons of other little roles over the years. I can't go through all of them or we'd be here all day. But that's kind of a bulk of the ones I found interesting, either because of the franchises they're a part of or just the roles themselves. So, let me know. We know we know what you like Peter Cullen as Optimus Prime. But if you know his career, let me know in the comments what your favorite one outside of Transformers is. Thank you very much for watching. I will see you next time.
We parlay with the captain.
You would think a werecroc is going to listen to elvish rules of piracy.
Of course it would be the freaking elves that invented parlay.
I had to think of a quick replacement for the French.